When I was little, I went to church camp and I followed the camp nurse around. She was a friend of the family. And I was always asking, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? That type of thing. And then once I got to college and everything, I decided, I wanted to study biology. I wanted to study the sciences. I looked at thinking, okay, I'm going to do like research or something like that. And I ended up becoming a home ec teacher. And so I'm sitting there going, trying to get work, trying to, teachers have a hard time getting a job teaching. So I was in my early 30s, and a friend of the family said, she says, I think you would make a good nurse. And I was like going, what? One time I thought about doing it. So at that point, I was a single mom. I was working 3 different jobs. I was lucky if I made $15,000 a year. And I was like, I had to do something, so that my son and I could live. And I was living with my parents. And so I went to nursing school. So that was one of the things that the friend told me. She said, she says, you won't ever have a problem finding a job if you become a nurse. And she's been right. I was not one of the nurses that was on the COVID unit, but yet we were support throughout the hospital to take care of other patients, because the nurses that were pulled to the COVID units, somebody had to replace them. Patients' families, we became, not only did we become their nurses, but we became their support systems, because their families were not allowed to come in and be with them. And so they were having to deal with going through, we still did surgeries because there were surgeries that had to be done. So these individuals were sicker. They needed more support. And so as a result, they turned to us, and we in turn had to supply that support, because they were like, all of a sudden, it was like they felt so alone. So we were having to learn how do we take care of our patients. We would have patients that would be diagnosed with COVID, and then we'd have to move them to the COVID unit. We would have to say, okay, are we safe enough in what we were provided with? Because all we were provided with was just a regular mask. And things kept changing as to how are you going to treat them, or how are you going to do this? And sometimes I felt kind of like I wasn't doing anything because I was on the fringe, but then I was reminded, no, you still have an important part, because of the fact we have to have nurses to be in the COVID units, but we have to have people to take care of these patients and fulfill their needs, because they don't have anybody else to fulfill those needs. So it was rough. I've had a number of mentors over the years. The first mentors I had was Darlene McWee and Jan Yoski and Mary Jo Schmidt. And Darlene and Jan were really good at telling me stories about how it was when they went to nursing school and the environment they worked in, which was so different than what I worked in. And they helped me bridge that gap between nursing school and actually working on a medical surgical unit. And then Mary Jo was really good at teaching me critical thinking. She always had 100 different ways to ask me a question. Now, why did you do that? Why did this happen? And I'm like going, oh no, I don't want to have to give Mary Jo a report tonight. But I learned more probably from her than a lot of the other nurses. But in recent years, since I've been at Centennial, my mentors have been our CNO, Cindy Lockyer, and Amy Higgins, which has now moved on to a different hospital, and Leanne Olam, because they taught me leadership. They taught me how to become a leader, because when I got to Centennial, I started working on helping them develop the Nurse Practice Council and making the bylaws and learning how to lead a group, because I ended up becoming chair of the Executive Nurse Practice Council. And I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And they helped me do that. And then our charge nurses, Kelly Millar and Dawn Julian, taught me how to be a charge nurse, because that was something I had not done in my past, and I've started doing that. And so they, through examples and just flat out saying, okay, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have taught me a lot. I had a hard time dealing with learning of trying to figure out what's the most gratifying or thing about nursing for me. It's probably twofold. One of them's always been watching my patients get better and helping them with their needs and stuff. That's one aspect. But one of the other things that I found I was surprised that I got gratification out of it was the leadership position where I worked on helping develop the bylaws for our Nurse Practice Council, where I helped develop our nurse practice councils, and I helped with some of the different units build their councils, and just having an impact with the nursing staff and their perception of their jobs and what we could better do to help them with their jobs and help with patient care. There's a couple different ways that I deal with continuing education. One is we have a terrific education department, HCA from corporate on down through division and at Centennial have always been on the forefront of providing us with education that we need for various different things. They're on top of current trends and stuff like that. Also, our educators are really good about helping us develop our own competencies. They come to us and say, okay, well, this is your job. What do you need to learn better for your job? That's one way. The other one is through NAON, which is the National Orthopedic Association of Nurses, and the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses. They provide a lot of continuing education. I'm a certified orthopedic nurse, so I have to maintain a certain amount of credits through that, and they provide credits for that. I became involved with Boy Scouts of America when my son was in the 2nd grade. He came home from school one day and said, "Hey, Mom, I would like to be a Cub Scout." So we went to find out what was going on, and of course, one of the things you have to do whenever you have a child that is in scouting, you have to also participate in scouting. You just can't, well, there were some people that would just send their child and say, okay, this is what they need done. But I started out as a den leader for my son's den. And from there, I ended up, we needed a Cub Master. I've been Cub Master. I also was, we ended up having to switch sponsors midstream because of some difficulty with the sponsor we had. So I ended up becoming the charter representative to the committee. I've held a number of different things, and then I ended up getting involved on the district level, where I ended up being commissioner for the Cub Roundtable, where I would train other Cub leaders for other units and help them with their units with some of the struggles they are. I also did some training on the council level, but probably one of the most interesting training things I did was I did Wood Badge, where you end up developing a plan for your unit and a project, and the whole goal is to learn management, where you're not doing the work, you get other leaders involved to help do the thing. And so that was an interesting aspect. And so through all that, I earned my Wood Badge and learned, helped with different training aspects throughout the district and council. And I ended up being awarded with a Silver Beaver back in 2015. My plans for the future right now are uncertain. I plan to retire in about 3 years. I'll be 70 in 3 years. But I have a few things that I want to be involved with. I'm involved with a charity group right now called My Peak Challenge. And it's a really good organization. It's one of these, and it's helped me a lot with stepping out of my comfort zone, because one of the things you do is you choose a challenge for yourself and you step out of your comfort zone to do this challenge. And while you're doing this, you're also raising money for other things. And some of the things we've been involved with is we raised money for blood cancer of the UK, where we funded our own trial for acute myeloid leukemia and some other things that they're doing. A hospice group. This past year, one of our charity groups was One Tree Planted, and when we had our big event in Scotland, which I got to go to, we planted an orchard, which was really interesting to talk to the people with One Tree Planted and how they're trying to reforest certain areas and do certain things. And so we were helping somebody out by planting an orchard for them. And so we had we had enough people to literally plant an orchard that day to do that. So, but I was involved with developing we have different topical groups or regional groups, and I'm the administrator for the Nashville Peaker group here, and also for a group called the Single Parent Peakers. And one of my goals really is to reach out to single parents and their struggles, because I know from my struggles in being a single parent, it's not easy to do things for your children and for yourself when you don't have any support. And some of the people, I was lucky I had my parents, but some people don't have anybody. And so what we're doing with this group, and we got people from, there's like 17,000 people globally that are in this group. And we got people, one of my co-admins lives outside of London, England. One lives in Connecticut. And we just really are working on trying to, even though we're far apart, we communicate with one another. And people in the group that are, they'll say, hey, I'm having a struggle with this, or I'm having a struggle with that. And we'll say, hey, we're here for you. Have you thought about this? And even though we're far apart, we still have developed a community to work together. The one experience, it's hard to say that I had one experience, but probably the biggest overall experience in my life that has taught me the most was probably becoming a single parent and going through my divorce and learning that that doesn't have to limit me, that I can accomplish something in my life besides just sitting around and go, woe is me, I don't know what to do. And as a result, learning how to do what I needed to do for my son. Now my struggle is learning to do what I need to do to help my mom. I would have never become a nurse if I had not become a single parent. I probably would have, being married, I probably would have continued being a substitute teacher, and I wouldn't have worked. I might have worked with scouting if my son had been interested in that. I mean, we ended up, because of my son wanting to do various things, I tried to say, okay, yes, I only have a limited amount of time. I am working all these jobs. I'm doing all this different stuff, but you're my focus. And trying to learn how to balance all that probably was the biggest thing in my life, was learning that, but we did amazing things. We did scouting. My son was also in the Pittsburgh Boy Choir. We traveled to Russia. I traveled on a tour bus with them as being their tour nurse. I learned to adjust my life, which I don't know that I would have learned to have adjusted it that much because I didn't feel like I had any confidence. But it seems like in the last probably 8 to 10 years, everything started to gel. And I know that my peak challenge has helped me. One of my struggles and my challenge I set for myself was to, okay, what can I do to improve myself so that I can do something for someone else?